in Las Vegas, so let's go straight over to William Speas, who's a crime scene analyst who took some of the first photos of Christy Mack after the attack.
NU 257B, this has been admitted. Would you please open that and show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at?
Again, a small paring knife.
Okay. Now, on the other knife and on this knife, it appears that there's writing on the knives.
Yes.
What is the purpose of that?
It has it being item 9, item 4 on this, and
it has a separate number over to the left-hand side,
yes.
Correct? And that would be for forensic analysis
that would be
purposes?
for the forensic people. It's not our event number.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If you put that back in for me.
So the contents are...
Thank you, Your Honor. NU 257C, if you would open that for me.
It's a broken knife blade. It's consistent with the handle that I recovered.
Okay. And again, there appears to be some writing on there for forensic analysis purposes.
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of the contents of 257C.
No objection.
And there was no objection to be correct.
Correct, Your
I
Honor.
don't think I was. Okay, so C on contents or any evidence.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Speas, 257D.
Another knife, also with forensic notations on it.
All right, I move for the admission of the package and the contents as 257D.
Any objection?
No objection.
D with its contents is admitted.
With that, Your Honor, I will pass the witness.
So cross-examination?
Thank you for being here, Agent Speas. Now, if I heard you correctly, you said that you've been a CSI agent for over 17 years, correct?
Yes, I have.
And in those 17 years, you've done over 4,000 investigations?
Yes, I have.
Now, I heard you speak generally about what your scope is. On the morning of August 8, 2014, what was the scope? What were you employed to do on that particular day?
I was dispatched to go to the hospital to start with and photograph a victim from what they said was a domestic violence.
And while you were at the hospital, you were briefed by other officers, correct?
And I was told that there was a scene also.
You were told what?
Then I was told that there was also a scene.
Okay. And I believe that you had stated that you were briefed, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe what you mean by briefed?
When I'm brief, I will come in and it will be told the victim's name, where they're at, any injuries they may have noticed right off, and then I'll go ahead and I'll talk to the nurse, I'll look at the person myself and then take photos.
And at that particular time, how many victims were you briefed on?
Just one.
And so while being briefed, you were only informed that there was one?
I learned, at that time, yes. Later I learned there was another one.
And at what point in time did you learn there was another one?
It was later in that evening, we'd had another CSA or crime scene analyst that had been dispatched on another one, but it was under a different event number. We only learned later that they were connected.
Okay. Now, when you left the hospital, you went to the scene, correct?
Yes.
And upon arriving at the scene, I believe that you stated that you had to wait outside, is that correct?
Yes.
At the time you were waiting outside, who was inside?
I don't recall who was inside. If anybody was going inside, it was going to be animal control because they had to remove the dogs and the ferrets.
Isn't it true that the dogs were removed from the backyard of the house?
I'm not sure what part of the residence they were removed from.
You just know that they were removed.
That's what I was told, the dogs were being removed.
And when you were out front, were the dogs still there?
I didn't see the dogs. I was just told they were being removed.
So you don't know?
No.
Now, at what point in time did you enter the house?
I
Were you the
can't-
first one to enter?
Well, I was the first one to, the house would have been cleared before I got in there, just to make sure there was no one inside.
And who would have cleared the house?
It would have been officers.
Okay. Metro?
Yes,
Okay. And then after the house was cleared, then you entered?
yes.
At the time that you were inside of the house, was anybody else inside the house with you?
There was officers inside the house.
Approximately how many other officers?
I can't actually recall how many.
To the best of your recollection, was it maybe just a couple, or was it pretty active scene?
Just a couple.
Just a couple? Okay. And so, when you entered the house, you eventually made your way over to the master bedroom, correct?
I was told by people that had come in and cleared it that this seemed to be the area of disturbance.
Okay. Was that in the master's bedroom, or was another bedroom in the house?
That was the main bedroom, the one that was,
Okay. And then, you entered the bedroom, correct?
yes.
And now, when you enter the bedroom, do you enter while snapping photographs, or do you enter the bedroom, walk around, check everything out, and then you go back and take photographs? How does that work?
I usually will walk around, I will make notations of what's in there.
And is that what you did here?
Yes.
And when you walked around, were you taking one section of the room at a time, or did you walk all throughout the bedroom, the bathroom, the closet area,
It
and
was
then go
all,
back and start?
it was all interconnected, it was all one large room.
Okay. And so after you did your walkthrough, then you came back to the front, and is that when you started photographing?
Yes.
And now, did you start photographing from the front, or did you start photographing from back inside the bathroom?
From the sleeping area down at the front.
Okay. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 22. Is this a fair depiction of the scene that you had started your photograph from?
That would be one of the first photos, that's in the sleeping area.
Okay. So while you're standing here and you're taking a photograph, what are you trying to capture?
In this one, this is pretty much an all-around, just overalls, just to show.
So nothing in particular in this one?
I'm panning through the room, so that does show the indentation in the wall.
Okay. And now, as you proceed to photograph items, you photograph this too, correct?
Yes.
Why did you photograph this?
It had a broken leg on it, and there was what appeared to be apparent blood on the corner.
Okay. And so it was your intentions to photograph this blood, correct?
Yes, just to document the scene.
Your job is to preserve evidence, correct?
Yes.
Did you do a blood swab?
Not from here,
Not from this area, you mean?
not from that area, no.
So you did not preserve that, is that correct?
I documented it, and that was it.
But is it fair to say you didn't preserve the evidence or not?
I didn't collect that as evidence.
Okay. And did you notice that the table was broken here?
Yes.
And while looking at the scene, was it your interpretation that an injury had occurred involving this table?
There was blood throughout that room, and so there had been some injuries, yes.
What about this table?
Exactly how that was broken, or I'm not sure. I mean,
Okay. Did you notice what appears to be narcotics sitting on the table?
Objection, Your Honor. As to the characterization of what's on the table.
Sustained?
All right.
Yes.
Did you notice the bag on the table?
this has been over 2 years. I don't know if I noticed it at the time, but yes, it's right there, yes.
Was that preserved?
No. Or that was not collected.
It's not collected. Okay. Now, you had mentioned that there was a hole in the wall.
Yes.
Was this the hole in the wall that you were talking about?
I'm so
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Sir, would you mind letting us know which exhibit?
Yes.
photographed?
State's Exhibit 33.
Thank you.
What was your interpretation of the hole?
From my experience and what I have actually seen on other scenes, it appears somebody's had been driven into that wall.
And did you swab this area?
I did.
And did you later learn whose DNA that was?
No, I did not.
Okay. And do you believe that, based upon your training and experience, that this blood got on the wall at the same time or thereabout when this hole was put in the wall?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
Overall.
There's no way to really tell exactly when that was on there. There's a swipe above the hole, that's all I know.
Through your training and experience, hypothetically speaking, if somebody was bleeding out the back of their head and their head had been pressed against the wall, would that blood mark be consistent with that?
It could be, yes.
Now, with the head pressing against the back of the wall, this is States 42. With the head pressed against the back of the wall, would it be consistent with sending a blood spatter over in this direction?
Objection, Your Honor. It's not an expert as to this stuff.
Your Honor, I've asked about his training and experience. If he feels that he has the training and experience to be able to answer this question, I believe that he should be able to answer the question. If it's beyond his scope, then
Way more foundation if you're going to go into blood spatter.
you've done over 4,000 investigations, correct?
Yes.
Have you analyzed blood?
I documented it, I'm not certified to analyze it.
Have you ever recreated a crime scene? Have you ever done crime scene reconstruction?
I'm not sure exactly what you're,
Have
under
you ever
what
walked-
text.
Have you ever walked through a crime scene
Yes.
and reconstructed of what you believe took place at that crime scene?
Yes.
Okay. And while reconstructing the crime scene as such is irrelevant to you and your investigations as to whether the angle of the blood is important? Do you analyze that in your training and experience in your 4,000 investigations?
I have.
Okay. And so with your training, knowledge, and experience, can you make a determination if this blood came from a specific angle?
Can we
Would you like me to zoom in?
zoom it, please? I can't even say for sure if that is blood. It's blood-like matter, but with the coloring and stuff, and I don't see any directionality in it.
So hypothetically speaking, if it was blood, it did not spatter from what you see over here to the left. Is that fair to say?
I don't feel comfortable with actually giving a definite answer on that.
Okay. So as you continue going through the crime scene, State's Exhibit 29, did you take this photograph?
I did.
And this shirt right here, you had collected that shirt, correct?
No, I did not. I photographed it and I documented it. I examined it to see if there was any like stab holes or anything like that. Other than that, I would just document it.
Now, as far as your scope of preserving evidence, how did you preserve this? Did you swab any blood from this scene?
I swabbed from one of the cabinets.
Do you see that cabinet in this picture?
It should be over on this side.
Okay. Did you document or photograph any blood from this scene?
I did overall just overall documentation in there.
I'm showing State's Exhibit 55. Is this a fair depiction of the bathroom that you photographed?
I
Yes,
believe this is the vanity area.
that is the vanity area, yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And this is the vanity area directly connecting from the, what I refer to as the hallway that you were viewing with the
The
blood,
hallway with the step up from the sleeping area.
with the substantial amount of blood that we were just looking at, is that correct?
If I could see that, would you? Yes, and that's the steps up into the vanity area.
Again, showing stage 44, Your Honor. Okay, so this goes into the vanity area, and is this the vanity area?
Yes.
Okay. Did you photograph or document any substantial blood in this room?
I documented the area that contained blood.
And did you photograph the areas where there was blood?
All you can see is there's some apparent blood on the carpet here, and
I don't see that. Can you point that out?
there might be appearance here. And there's some stains.
Is that what you're identifying? The what appears to be wig hair?
It may have been wig hair.
Okay. Going to show you State's Exhibit 52. Is this that same vanity room?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell me what this is?
That's apparent blood.
Did you document that?
I did there, and I took a swab.
You collected it?
Yes, I did.
Did you later learn whose blood that was?
No, I did not.
Showing you State's Exhibit 56. Did you take this photograph?
Yes,
And in this photograph, did you notice any blood?
it's a little dark, so
What happened if I zoom in?
sure. There should be some discoloration, could be blood right up here on the shower door.
So you noticed this and you took a picture of it, correct?
It was part of my overalls.
And in your, what did you say, overalls?
Overall photographs.
Overall photographs. So in your overall photographs, when you noticed that, did you look into the shower?
I can believe I did, but I don't exactly recall. Like I said, it was 2 years ago.
Now, was it fair to say that the picture that you're looking at, that's a clear glass door that you can see through?
Yes,
Yes, you can. And in that shower, did you see any shorts?
I don't recall any shorts.
If you don't recall any shorts, you certainly didn't photograph any shorts, is that correct?
Right now, I don't recall any shorts, whether I photographed them or not, or whether it's...
I'm showing you State 69.
Are you talking the yoga pants? Yeah.
No, I was talking shorts, but
Oh.
now I'm showing you States 69. Do you recall seeing these?
Yes,
Now, when you first saw these, they weren't laid out like this, correct?
no,
And then you had laid them out,
yes,
and then you documented what appears to be blood on the pants.
yes.
I'm showing you States 53. What is this in the center of the room?
It's a towel.
Fair to say it's commonly known as a shower towel? Bath towel?
Sure.
Is there any blood on that?
Not that I can see.
What is this item right here?
That is the knife handle.
And this knife handle, it's fair to say that there's no blade attached, is that correct?
That's correct.
Showing you stage 16. Is this the handle that we just saw in that picture?
Yes, it is.
Stage 79. Is this the blade that we just saw in that picture?
There was no blade in that picture.
I'm sorry. Is this the blade that was missing from the handle that we just saw?
It's consistent with it. Whether that is the actual blade from it, I do not know.
Okay. I'm showing you stage 13. Is this the blade that I just showed you?
It appears to. I did not take this photo.
And you walk through the house. What location in the house is this picture taken from?
That was be in the kitchen.
Okay. And what is this right here?
It's a knife block.
And it's a fairly large knife and two other knives. Did you notice whether any knives were missing from the block?
I didn't take these photographs and stuff like that. I was mostly in the bedrooms.
But you inspected the house, correct?
I don't recall seeing these.
Do you recall ever making a conclusion or determination of whether one of these knives happened to be in another location in the house?
Did a look through the kitchen and stuff like that. The area was closed down. We had somebody that went back later when it was recovered.
And in the vanity room that I was showing you, did you locate a second knife?
Yes, I did.
Showing stage 57. Is this the other knife that you located?
Yes.
And what are these right here?
They appear to be wigs.
Did you preserve those wigs?
Did I collect them?
Did
No.
you collect them? You
No.
did not. Did you notice whether the wigs were damaged?
I did not know if they were damaged or what. They were just thrown onto the floor.
Did you make a determination or conclusion on whether or not any of these wigs were damaged?
Just in the condition they are and stuff like that, I could not tell you if they were damaged. I know that there was other fibers and stuff that were around the house, or around the bedroom.
I'm going to refer back to one of the photographs that we were previously looking at.
Okay.
Does this appear to be consistent
Yeah,
with the wigs that we were just looking at?
Tufts of hair and or wigs.
So it's fair to say that you drew a conclusion that the wigs were in fact damaged, correct?
I didn't conclude, I just documented it.
Showing stage 58. These are the wigs that we were just looking at, correct?
Yes.
Now after documenting it, do you know who collected these wigs?
I don't know if they were collected.
Stage 59. Is this the same scene that we were just looking at, but closer?
That's what it appears to be, yes.
And did you end up testing this knife?
Tested the blade, yes.
Showing you stage 14. Is this the blade that you tested?
Yes.
And is this the blade that we were just looking at?
May I see the other?
Would it help if you refer to your notes?
It appears to be. This doesn't, I can see more serrating on this one than on the other side, but it could be because it's flipped
Do you have your notes with you?
I do have some notes.
Would you need to refer to your notes to know whether or not this knife was the one from the scene we were just looking at?
If I may?
Please.
Okay, I have this in my notes as being on the floor adjacent to the steps leading to the third level. So that would put that into the vanity area, which was item number 5. I did collect it, and I did do a presumptive test for blood on the blade of that knife.
And did you later learn whether or not there was any blood on that knife?
I did not know if there was any blood. My presumptive test was negative.
Now, if I were able to rest my pen on this document, are you able to determine whether the document was set down before the pen or whether the pen was set down before the document?
Could you rephrase that, please?
I have 2 items here that you're looking at.
Okay.
A document and a pen.
Okay,
Are you able to determine, while looking at it right now, which one was set down first?
sure. The pen's overlaid on top of it.
I'd like you to take a look at State's Exhibit 60. This knife that we were just looking at?
Yes?
What do you see wrapped around the blade?
I see some fibers, hair-like fibers that are over it.
Did you preserve those?
Apparently I do not have those on there.
So they were not collected.
No.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
There, read the record.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Speas, when you initially go out to Sunrise Hospital, what facts did you know about regarding this case? What were you aware of had occurred?
Oh, I just went on, it was on a 417 or a domestic violence case. And that I went out there and that's what I knew. Once I got there, I was given a name, I was given who was the lead officer on the call. And that was it.
So you didn't necessarily know who did that to Ms. McInday?
I had no idea, no.
You didn't necessarily know when those injuries occurred?
No.
And she was unable to speak to you to give you further details, correct?
She was in no condition to speak to me.
Okay. Similarly, when you went out to the scene, when you went out to the residence at the Pueblo Way residence, what facts did you know then?
That there had just been a apparent struggle in there. There was blood on there. It was working the same. We did not have a lot of detail.
Okay. Because you responded somewhat soon after the incident, you didn't necessarily have the whole story as to what transpired in the bedroom.
That's correct.
So without those facts, there might be some things that, in hindsight, you maybe wish you would have collected later.
Sure.
Was there quite a bit of blood throughout the bedroom?
That's kind of a hard
That
amount to do. I've been on scenes with a lot more blood. I've been on scenes with a lot less blood. So yes, but there was a substantial amount.
Okay. Do you recall the photograph? All right. I want to show you just one photo here, because there is a decent discussion about it. This is Exhibit 42. And there was some questioning about whether or not this area over here was some sort of spatter. You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
First and foremost, do you know what substance this is?
From looking at this, I can't tell you for sure that that's blood. It appears to even be a different color than over here.
All right. And you don't necessarily know how this blood or whatever substance that is got there.
No, I don't know if that's cast off or what.
And I believe you said during the cross-examination that it did not appear that there was any directionality to that.
No, looking at it, I do not see it.
And tell us what directionality is.
Directionality is that the blood would have kind of like a pointed end towards it, something like that, where once it hits, part of the blood will continue on and it'll make kind of a pointed pattern to it.
So moving blood as it transverses another plane might continue to have movement to it.
Yes, that's if it's from the side. Directly onto it, if it splattered right onto it, it might go like that. If it's on the floor, it'd be more considered passive, or it'd be just dropping down.
So if it came from this area over here, would you expect to be some directionality?
I would think so.
There was also some questioning about some items, particularly, do you recall the pictures with the kitchen knives is what I'll refer to them as?
Okay.
All right. You personally collected, State's Exhibit 6, you collected this knife, correct?
Yes.
And then and this knife was located near the wigs, near the shower?
Yes.
And you also collected the handle of the knife, correct, near your vanity?
Yes.
All right. And those were the items, I'll show you Exhibit 16 here.
Yes.
Okay. And those were the items that were admitted from the bag. I believe it was admitted as 256.
Okay. Yes.
All right. And the other knives, then, the kitchen knives, you personally did not collect these knives. This is Exhibit 13.
That's correct.
Another CSA by the name of Ms. Cruz collected those knives.
Yes.
And do you know whether or not Ms. Cruz collected any other items?
Really, that's all she collected was those knives and that knife blade.
Needless to say, though, there were a couple crime scene analysts that came out to assist in the preservation and collection of evidence
They came afterwards.
afterwards. That picture here, you tested this for, and it came back as a parent blood, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you don't necessarily know whether that blood got there before or after this indentation.
No.
Your Honor, I'll pass this.
Okay, any recross?
What time did you arrive at the hospital,
Check your notes.
please?
I arrived at the hospital at 5:06 in the morning.
And you stated that when you arrived that Ms. McInday was in no condition to speak, is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you aware that Officer Shoemaker had showed up 16 minutes prior to you and received a statement from Ms. McInday?
She may have, but when I was there talking to her, she was pretty incoherent.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Next.
They called Detective Daniel Tomino.
If you could, make your way up into the box, remain standing. Raise your right hand, face that gentleman right there, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this action will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state your complete name, spelling both your first and last name for the record.
Daniel Tomino, D-A-N-I-E-L-T-O-M-A-I-N-O.
Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Detective. How are you employed?
With Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department,
And how long have you been with Metro?
13 years.
Right now, what section are you currently in?
I'm currently in the computer forensic lab.
What does someone working as a detective in the computer forensic lab do?
We take in and examine cell phones, computers, and we're trying to do network intrusions as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn your attention back to 2014. Were you working in what's termed as the CFL lab at that point in time?
I was not. I was a domestic violence detective at the time.
I'd like to ask you some general questions in regards to the battery domestic violence unit. So can you explain to me how a detective working in the battery domestic violence unit would be notified that a domestic violence incident had occurred?
Well, patrol will respond. They're first responders. They respond to whatever the incident happens to have been. If they were called by a witness to a domestic violence incident, or by the victim, or sometimes by the suspect themselves, that gets routed through dispatch. They arrive. They make a determination on whether or not batteries occurred, whether or not there's a relationship between the two individuals, and what the level or classification of the battery would have been, if it was a misdemeanor or a felony. If it's within 24 hours, then they're going to make an arrest if the suspect is if the suspect is available to them, if they're at the scene at the time, or attempt to make an arrest within 24 hours. If it's outside that scope, then they're not going to. It's going to get forwarded to myself.
Okay, so if let's say 911 call comes in, there's an active battery domestic violence incident going on right then. So it would be most likely that patrol, or pretty much all the time, patrol usually first on scene. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Is patrol, are their main job duties to kind of assess the situation, make contact with any witnesses, victims, etc., and then after doing so, make contact with someone in the battery domestic violence unit like yourself?
If necessary. They conduct a preliminary investigation. They make an arrest if they can. They determine those three factors. And if it exceeds their level of skill, such as a search warrant is necessary in order to obtain evidence, or to enter a structure specifically to obtain that evidence, or if it is substantial injury. There has to be significant injury for us to be called out, regardless of whether or not the suspect happens to be in custody at the time.
Okay. Now, we have said the term battery domestic violence so many times just in your testimony, and I think lay people have a general idea of what that means. But can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the type of relationships that would rise to the use of that term?
For domestic violence to occur, you must be living with the individual, not somebody who comes and stays with you overnight. It would be somebody who's staying with you long term. That would be considered a domestic relationship, or somebody you are related to by blood, or by marriage, or someone that you might be dating before you even get being married. That would be someone who would be a domestic violence victim or suspect.
Okay, so it could be someone who's simply, they're not living together, but they're boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yes.
So now I want to ask you a little bit about your investigative unit, so the battery domestic violence investigative unit in general. When you were working in 2014 as a detective, how many other detectives worked on your unit?
There were a total of 12 of us, so I was one of 12.
And can you give me an idea of your caseload? Like, let's put it in terms of how many cases would you investigate or would be forwarded to you in a week?
In a week, we averaged anywhere between 40 to 50 cases per detective.
And then, so how many cases were you actively investigating in like a year's time?
Somewhere between 1,800 and 2,200.
Do you know how many battery domestic violence cases you investigated during your term on that unit?
I was there for about 4.5 years, so I'd estimate somewhere around 7,500 to 8,000.
In regards to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, just in general, the domestic violence investigative unit is one of the highest caseloads in the entire department. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So going back to, initial 911 call comes out, patrol goes, assesses the situation, and decides, yeah, this is something where I feel like a domestic violence detective should come out. Once you go to the scene, can you walk us through the job duties of a detective versus the patrol officer?
I'm going to substantiate that what they've done was correct, that they've already established that there was a domestic relationship, that the battery had occurred. Whether or not they've made witness or victim statements, if they have a suspect in custody, make contact with the suspect and try to do a suspect interview as well. All my interviews are not done the way patrol would do. Patrol would have them completed by voluntary statement. Our skill set lends us to the ability to be able to do it on tape in a very structured manner, to be able to elicit disclosures from the victims or confessions from suspects.
So it's a more in-depth type of interview or contact than patrol's initial information gathering. Would that be a fair statement?
That'd be fair, because their intent is to basically establish the report by which the crime would be established.
While working on that unit, did you ever have contact with either family members or friends calling in saying, hey, my wife, or not my wife, but my sister or my cousin is in a battery domestic violence type relationship, it's happening all the time, can you go arrest so-and-so?
Absolutely. But the significance for the family members that are able to identify that domestic violence is occurring is not the same as what it is for the patrol officer or myself when we're actually conducting the investigation. They're going to identify all the signs. They may not have seen it, they may have heard it. A battery occurred not in their presence. They'd be in the next room, they hear stuff getting shuffled around, they'll hear a victim screaming or a suspect yelling or whatever. They'll hear the sights and sounds without actually visually seeing the actual battery occurring. So there's not much we can do with that investigation unless the victim calls at that point in time to be able to establish that the actual crime is occurring. By the time they're calling, there's no physical evidence of injury. There's no cuts. There's no bruising. There's no substantial bodily harm to the individual. There's no broken bones. There's nothing to identify except for the screaming they heard and the noises that they heard. So it's very difficult for us to establish a crime or to have a crime report completed for the family members that are identifying that they believe that domestic violence is occurring.
Okay. Now, you said something a moment ago. You said in order to make arrest, we have to establish 3 things. Can you explain again to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what those 3 things are that need to be established in order for an arrest to be made?
We're looking for the domestic relationship, whether it occurred within the last 24 hours or outside of it, and the actual battery itself. So we need a witness to the battery, or we need physical signs of it. We need the bruising, or we need the break, or we need the blood, or we need the cut. We need something that actually establishes what it is that the victim is supposed to be telling us that's supposed to have occurred.
And then what's the significance of the 24-hour period?
Misdemeanors not committed in our presence. Battery domestic violence is a unique misdemeanor in that it's the only one that it is a misdemeanor that I do not have to actually witness the battery to occur for me to make an arrest upon it. Any other, it's going to take my witnessing it, or I'm going to be doing a citizen's arrest on the individual to be able to do a misdemeanor arrest on somebody. It's not me witnessing. So for battery domestic violence, we show up, we're going to arrest the individual for patrol, and if it's outside of 24 hours, then they're going to submit that case over to me as a domestic violence detective, and I'm going to look through the report, identify if they had witnesses, if they had injury, if they met the criteria for domestic violence, and then I will submit that case over to the DA's office, and he'll prosecute.
Okay, so let's talk about when a case comes to your desk. So you don't go out and do an investigation. Patrol originally goes out. It's outside of the 24-hour time frame, so this comes to you as an investigation from Control. Is it your job duties, is it your job to then go through the entire history of the relationship and find out if this is something that has been ongoing for months, years, etc.?
It's not pertinent to the investigation itself to establish that crime had occurred.
Is your main job duty to investigate the crime that occurred specifically in reference to the report?
That's it.
Now, often, I imagine oftentimes you either go out to a scene where domestic violence has been committed, or a case comes to your desk, and it's not the first time between the two individuals.
Common.
That would be a very common thing.
Very.
After you establish that there has been a domestic violence incident, do the victims then get put in touch with what's referred to as like a victim's advocate, or the district attorney's office, to discuss either prior abuse or the abuse in and of itself?
Every case for domestic violence is something that we have to review as a detective, and every single case that we review all goes to the victim's advocates, regardless of whether or not I refer them to the victim's advocates. They review every single case and make contact with every single victim. Manner than having to wait until the case shows up in their queue.
Is it then common for the victim who had just been victimized to discuss with the advocate, hey, this isn't the first time this has been going on, things like that?
It's very common in crimes against youth and family for any one of the types of cases that were specific to not unknown suspect to victims, that they would not disclose, because you're dealing with matters of the heart, and you're dealing with issues where victims don't readily want to come and identify that they were victimized by somebody they know and love.
And you use the term crimes against youth and family, and that can be domestic violence type issues, but that can also be like issues of sexual assault committed by a family member.
Absolutely.
Or things like that. Now, you had spoken a moment ago about, family members coming to you sometimes and trying to report domestic violence. So now I want to ask you, when a victim comes forward and reports domestic violence, there can be some time between the incident that happens and then actually going to court. Would that be a fair statement?
It could be at a very extended period of time.
In a number of the cases that you investigated, by the time it goes to court, have victims recanted and said, oh, no, I'm not going to go forward with this?
Pretty common.
And in certain cases, do they actually have to be arrested in order to come to court and testify?
Yes, we don't do it specifically. I mean, it's commanded by the court for material witness for the victim to show.
Now, ultimately, after you do investigate the case and then submit it to the district attorney's office for prosecution, would you say it is common or uncommon for the district attorney's office to then meet with the victim and go over the court process with the victim?
Absolutely.
And in what's referred to as a pretrial conference, does the district attorney and the victim then discuss the history of the relationship?
I believe they do. I mean, they go.
Relaxed foundation calls for speculation.
Let me lay a better foundation if I can, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Oftentimes, when you submit a case to the district attorney's office, you submit with a certain amount of charges. Would that be correct?
That'd be correct.
And would those charges be regarding the incident that you actually investigated?
Yes, it would be.
Now, if a victim then meets with the district attorney's office and the court, by the time you actually get to court, would you say it's common or uncommon that more charges are then added to the charging document?
Object to relevance. At this point, the whole line has gone beyond that scope. It doesn't matter what usually happens, it matters what happened in this case.
Would you like me to respond, Judge?
Come on up.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Aaron Keller with the Law News Network. We're here watching the War Machine attempted murder trial from Las Vegas, and I'm joined by Deborah Blum, who's a defense attorney who's been watching this case along with us here today. And again, we have seen this day in and day out, and we were just remarking about it. We are watching the prosecution ask an inane number of leading questions for their own witness. Why is this going on?
I've never seen anything like this. The defense attorneys should be jumping out of their seats and objecting when the prosecutor is leading to this degree. And the Nevada rules of evidence are no different than the other states in the sense that you are allowed to object. And there are many bases for objection, such as leading, which is what is happening time and time again in this trial.
You're a defense attorney. I have never worked in a defense office, so it's interesting to hear the criticism coming from you rather than me, who worked in a prosecutor's office for a while, because the roles are almost reversed in this case. It's boggling my mind. I'm surprised that War Machine is not putting up a harder fight in this case. I'm surprised by the degree of leeway that the defense is giving the prosecution, and we've been trying to make sense of a defense strategy for several days here, and I'm not following it.
I'm not following their defense strategy either. And what's interesting is that War Machine seems to be having rather jovial reactions. He seems pretty happy for somebody who's charged with such serious offenses, and I don't think that he comprehends that his defense attorneys, in my opinion, are at this point, I think it's fair to say, not doing their jobs.
That's a pretty harsh accusation, and we had some discussion about this morning, because these defense attorneys are not unknown. They have won awards. They've won prestigious awards. They're not people who are known for not mounting a strong defense. Lederman, who is the primary defense attorney, normally defends Anonymous, the hacking group. They certainly, if charged, would need strong defense work. And he's been a leading marijuana advocate in the state of California, where he's licensed. And again, he has made a name for himself dealing with very tough emerging issues.
You know, we aren't there, so we don't know exactly what's going on, and it's also easier for us to sit here and judge. So, you know, we should give them some credit that they're accomplished defense attorneys, but the whole case is really strange. When we saw the questioning of the forensics expert, the defense attorney right away just lashed into him, asking him an aggressive question, whereas usually as a defense attorney, your strategy with a favorable witness would be only to attack when necessary.
Exactly. You know, so let's continue on, because the testimony is resuming in Las
How many years
Vegas.
did you say you've been on the department?
13 years. I've been a detective for about 9.
Okay, in the 13 years you've been on the department, have you had many cases go throughout the court system?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that it's quite common before a victim goes to testify in like a trial or preliminary hearing, they meet with the district attorney that's handling their case in what's referred to as a pretrial conference?
Yes.
in those, once a pretrial conference has happened and then the case moves forward, is it quite common that charges can be added to reflect the entire domestic violence history of the relationship?
Added, removed, or dismissed.
Okay. And that was going to be my next question. Your charges that are submitted to the district attorney's office, what's referred to as a screening department,
Yes.
Are those the charges that the district attorneys have to stay with? How would you characterize the charges you submit?
We recommend charges only. We look at the entire case. We establish the probable cause that identifies that the different crimes have occurred. But our expertise is pretty much just establishing that probable cause. We don't argue it. We send it over to screening. Screening identifies whether or not what we submitted to them was legitimate, and they identify whether or not the charges we have submitted to them would be accepted for prosecution. They amend the charges all the time. I mean, I have cases that are denied prosecutorial discretion or identified as changing of charges, where they upgrade charges, downgrade charges, or just remove charges entirely.
Okay. And then is it your understanding if the case is approved, the case then moves out of the screening department and is assigned to a deputy to actually litigate the case?
Correct. What screening just looks at what I did. They don't do any investigation. There's nothing for them. They're not going to prosecute it. It just goes straight from them over to whoever it is that's going to be assigned to the DA's office.
Okay, thank you. And would you mind just scooting up a little bit closer to the microphone? Because sometimes you're a little bit soft-spoken, and I just want to make sure everyone can hear you. Thank
Sure.
you so much. I appreciate it. Now, I would like to turn your attention to August 8th of 2014, if we could, sir. In the morning of August 8th, did you become aware that a domestic violence had happened on a street called Pueblo here in Las Vegas in Nevada?
I was.
And how was it that you get the call to go?
I believe it was a patrol sergeant that was the relieving patrol sergeant, identified the need for a domestic violence call-out. They identified, established the significance and severity of the crime and realized the fact that a detective needed to respond. So they made contact with my supervisor, which I believe at the time was Sergeant Greg Schultz, and he notified me because I was the bucket detective, which would be one of two individuals assigned to handle calls and incoming cases specifically for that day if there was a significance to them.
Okay, so you're the detective that's on call, so you received the phone call?
That was it.
And upon receiving that phone call and being assigned as the detective, where do you go first?
Went directly to the scene. I wanted to see what it was that I was supposed to be identifying for crime and try to make contact with whoever the responding patrol officers were.
When you responded to the crime scene, and we're referring to the residence that was located on Pueblo Way, is that correct?
Correct.
What was the status of the investigation there?
Nearly complete. And by the time I had gotten there, it turned out that the crime scene analysts were there for an hour and a half or 2 hours already, that the patrol officers that were there for graveyard were already gone, and that the people that were on scene were basically just on standby making sure that everything was recovered and that the CSAs were basically safe to recover them until they were complete.
Now, were you able to actually walk in the house and the scene, or no?
I was able to walk in and I was able to see the scene as it was, and I kind of got a brief walkthrough, I believe, by one of the CSAs. They kind of said this is where it was and these are the things that happened, and kind of identified some of the stuff was in there, but I really didn't have a story.
Okay, and when you use the term CSA, for the record, that would be a crime scene analyst?
Crime scene analyst.
Okay, so after assessing the scene, making contact with the crime scene analyst, did you then have occasion to go to Sunrise Hospital?
Yes, maybe being there for 15 minutes, I found out exactly where the victims were at, and I took myself and my partner to Sunrise Hospital to meet with the victims.
Okay. When you arrived at the hospital, were you able to make contact with an individual by the name of Corey Thomas?
He was one of two, yes.
And had he already made contact with the patrol officers?
By the time I'd gotten there and spoken with him, he said that patrol was there, had spoken with him, and that he completed a voluntary statement. That the patrol officer that was there, I believe, wrote the statement out for him.
And when you use the term voluntary statement, and I think your answer just defined it, but a voluntary statement in that scenario is something that he wrote that you would write out.
Correct, because patrol has the ability to, listen to what people say, write it down, or take the voluntary statement from them as they write it down, or in this case, apparently the victim was not able to. I mean, he could barely see when I was trying to speak with him. He didn't really know who the heck I was, except by me telling him, as far as I knew. And then he told me that the statement had been written out by the responding patrol officer.
Fair to say the injuries to Mr. Thomas were, I mean, as he looked on that day, pretty severe.
Substantial. I mean, he had a lot of puffy eyes. Looked like he'd fought a little bit.
And then were you able to speak to him or get a synopsis of his rendition of the facts that had happened, which led you to be an investigator?
I did. I asked him, you know, what was I actually there for? Because nobody had a full story of what was supposed to have occurred.
And when you say nobody had a full story, meaning the crime scene analysts and the officers at scene in the original house?
Correct. The responding patrol officers that would have taken all the information and put it in a report weren't around. So I asked him for his story. He gave me a brief synopsis of what it was, and that was it.
And did you also make contact with a female by the name of Christine McInday?
I did. She was in the neighboring room right next to her. Right next to him.
I apologize, I interrupted you. Say that again.
She was in the room right next to him.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as State 102. Is this what Miss McInday looked like when you made contact with her?
It was.
And in regards to, she had several pretty severe injuries. Would that be a fair characterization?
From what I could see visually, yes. She was still in a state where they were trying to figure out exactly what all her injuries were.
Showing you states 109, due to the amount of swelling to her face and especially her mouth, was it difficult at times for her to speak with you?
Incredibly difficult. I mean, I could really barely understand what she was saying at the time when I started speaking with her.
Did she appear to be in pain, kind of working through this process at the hospital?
She appeared to be in pain.
Due to her receiving, well, actually, let me ask you this. While you were there at the hospital, were they still receiving treatment?
Yes, she still was.
And due to the fact that she was receiving treatment and because of the severity of the injuries, did you ask her, any further questions besides her name and those types of things?
I told her that I'd be back later. I'd give her an opportunity to basically rest up before I put her on tape. I wanted her to be clear and articulate and being able to tell me what was supposed to have occurred. I'd already gotten the story from Corey and was comfortable that domestic violence had occurred. I left her my card and asked her if she had any questions, and I believe she was asking about where her mother was at because her mother hadn't arrived yet.
Okay. There had been some previous testimony that by the time crime scene analysts were able to take pictures that she was incoherent. Did you have any reason to believe that she was, drunk or on drugs or anything like that? Did you see anything that you felt that was an issue?
Nothing that I could tell. I mean, I just couldn't understand what she was saying, but it was mostly because she didn't have teeth.
Yeah, it was just... And showing you states 110.
It's already admitted.
Showing you states 110. Is that a fair and accurate depiction of her mouth, the swelling, and the teeth that are missing?
It was.
Thank you. So after you've gone to the hospital, made contact with Mr. Thomas and Miss McInday, what would, at that point in time, had the defendant been apprehended?
He was not. He was still not in custody, so I made contact with dispatch to have patrol stand by on both my victims while we were waiting for her mother to actually show up.
Why do you do that?
It's due to the profile of the individual that was actually involved. An ex-MMA fighter or current MMA fighter who was completely skilled in his craft. And
Hold on. Come on up, counsel.
fair to say because of the defendant's skill level within his profession, you were worried for the victim's safety in case he decided to come back?
For him, hospital staff, and any officer that came in contact with him.
Now, I should actually ask you, and this question should have proceeded, you knew at that time who it was that you were looking for, who the suspect was, is that correct?
By then I knew who he was.
Okay. So after you contact patrol to make sure that there are safety mechanisms in place at the hospital, where do you go next?
Me and my partner went back to the office because I was trying to locate the report. I wanted to see what the responding officers had actually completed for the reports.
And you use the term your partner. Who was your partner at the time?
Eric Robinson.
And you had previously mentioned that the initial patrol officers on scene had already left. Their shift was already over, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, if a patrol officer goes to a scene and they make a report, can you then access those reports once they're uploaded into your system?
Once they're uploaded, then I have access to them. Patrol has access to them only while they're on scene and while they're in their computer. When they get back to a substation, then my understanding was they uploaded straight into the net and eventually got into the P1 queue, which would be the software that we use in order to be able to access all the cases.
And then once you take over the investigation, are they then able to reaccess those reports, or those reports then stay with you?
They're now mine. I mean, they still have the opportunity to be able to update if they wanted to, but it's all notated within the system itself who updates a report. It keeps a log of anybody who accesses.
Understood. Now, when patrol is about to leave their shift or end their shift for the day or night, whenever it is they're getting off, do they commonly put in what's referred to as briefing notes?
They do.
Can you explain what a briefing note is?
It's patrol briefing, and it is a tool that is utilized by any patrol officer to notify the oncoming shift or oncoming shifts for approximately 30 days of incidents that occurred during their shift. So if a shooting occurred in a certain location and no suspect was located, or if a violent domestic occurred, or if a robbery occurred in some location, it's a way for patrol to be able to talk to the next shift without having to sit there and be able to physically talk to them and explain what occurred on their shift. Because unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to talk to the oncoming shift. We want patrol officers out there patrolling, not sitting in the substation talking to one another. So the overlap is about an hour to 2 hours per shift. So they go right back, type up a synopsis of what's supposed to have occurred. The oncoming shift will read those briefing lines and identify what was supposed to have occurred during the previous shift while the other ones have gone home.
Okay. So then when you get to your office, do you have access to what's referred to as those briefing notes that we just discussed?
Everybody on the department has access to them.
And do you also have access to the reports that patrol writes out once they're uploaded into the system?
The ones that they write, because right now it's computer-based, so everything they do is basically just typed up and put into the system. For a written report, it takes a while for it to get from their hands into an LEST, law enforcement support technician, for them to be able to get it scanned into another software database of OnBase.
Okay, so when you get back to your office, do you attempt to go through the computer system to locate information based on your active investigation?
I did.
And what were you able to look through?
At the time I was able to look, it took a little bit for P1 to update so that I was able to see the reports that were in there. But at the time I was only aware of one event number, which was event 0494. So on that, at that time it was 1408080494. And I believe that's actually Corey's event. But I wasn't able to find any of the reports in P1, so I looked through briefing lines to see if I could find something in patrol briefing, and I found Corey's event, and then I saw a reference in there that identified another event, 0491, from the same exact event date, 140808. And in that one, the briefing line was completely different than the first one. The first one identified everything that established the domestic violence and that Corey had been injured and that there was a second victim. When I looked at the second one, it identified that SA was supposed to have occurred and that the victim was Chrissy Mack, and was very specific about what was supposed to have occurred there.
Okay, so let me ask you a few questions on some of the terminology that you used. You used the term P1, which stands for Premier 1, is that correct?
That is correct.
And Premier 1 is the computer technology that the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department uses?
For all reports, yes.
Thank you. And then you also said when you went in and referenced the event number having to do with Miss McInday, you used the term, you saw that an SA was involved. So the briefing notes mentioned that Miss McInday had discussed a sexual assault.
Sexual assault, yes.
Okay. Now, because the briefing notes established that a sexual assault had been involved, what was your next step in the investigation?
Since I was a domestic violence detective and we have very specific sexual assault detectives, I made contact with the people that were oversitting in SA at that time. I ended up making contact with Detective Jason Lafreniere.
And Detective Jason Lafreniere is a detective who's been within the sexual assault unit for several years. Is that correct?
Quite a few years, both juvenile and adult.
And does he have a forensic interviewing technique that should be used on sex assault victims?
Absolutely.
And so when you made contact with him, did you request him to respond to the hospital to do the interview with Miss McInday?
I did. My skill set was not there anymore, so I asked him specifically to go there and make contact and verify that what I had read in the briefing lines was accurate. Because when P1 updated, when Premier 1 updated the reports, it wasn't in either one of them. It didn't identify that SA was in either one.
The briefing notes from the patrol officers who had contact with Ms. McInday, it was located there?
It was located there, yes.
Now, you said earlier that you started to say earlier that you had sent out what's referred to as an all points bulletin. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
What is that?
That's basically me being able to reach dispatch to be able to put out a teletype through all agencies within Southern Nevada or all of the United States or some specific state, identifying where a suspect is or where a missing person is or missing vehicle, stolen vehicle, anything we're trying to locate and we need other jurisdictions' assistance or our jurisdiction alone, it gets put out.
Okay, so you're getting the word out there, we're actively investigating this, we're looking for this suspect.
Yes, I put out that identifying that I had probable cause to arrest Jonathan Copenhaver based on an SA that occurred, sexual assault that occurred, and that domestic violence that occurred, substantial bodily harm to a second victim, and that he was, a skilled MMA fighter that basically needed, for officer safety, that officers knew who they were dealing with.
Okay, so when Detective Lafreniere was finished with his interview, did he call you and provide kind of a summary of the interview?
He did. When I spoke with him initially, it was so that I could get some kind of a synopsis as quickly as possible, and he called me from the hospital after he'd spoken with her and basically confirmed that the briefing line was absolutely correct.
Okay. Now, after you get done speaking with Detective Lafreniere, at that point in your investigation, both victims have been interviewed, is that correct?
That's correct.
The crime scene has been documented and evidence collected.
Been processed, yes.
But the defendant is still not apprehended.
Correct.
Now, you weren't able to recover Miss McInday's cell phone was not recovered at her home.
No, my understanding was that it was taken by Mr. Copenhaver.
In a normal situation, or I shouldn't say normal because I don't think any of these situations are normal, but in a situation where you don't feel like the threat level or the violence level is as heightened as you're now discussing, do you submit the case right away, or how does that process work?
It wouldn't be an immediate search warrant, or sorry, an arrest warrant would not be immediately put out. We'd attempt to try to locate the individual if possible. But for submission for an actual arrest warrant wouldn't be until, numerous days later.
Okay. Due to the injuries that the victim sustained and your concerns with which you've already discussed, did you work and make sure the arrest warrant was done? Did you actually come in the following day on your day off?
I did.
And so explain to me what you did from there.
So I had been receiving calls from throughout Southern California and Nevada identifying that if they had gotten the guy in custody, that they needed some kind of a warrant to be able to make this thing go through. Probable cause wasn't going to work for all of them. They felt more comfortable with an arrest warrant. So on the following morning, I came in and completed an arrest warrant. But nobody works on weekends specifically to have an arrest warrant walk through the DA's office for signing. So I had a partner of mine, Detective Barb Morgan, walk the thing through. I spoke with her on that weekend, on that Saturday, and had her walk it through on Monday, which was her first day back.
And that warrant, when you say walked through the court, walked over to the Regional Justice Center, and that arrest warrant was approved. Is that correct?
Correct. We have two ways that we'd submit warrants. The one way would be the most common way, which is we just type everything up and then we submit it in a manila folder, 1,000-miler, and send it over to the DA's office, and it gets over to screening. Screening goes through it with a fine-tooth comb, identifies what's right and what's not, and then they identify that a warrant is going to be issued for that particular crime. For this, and on rare circumstances, we actually walk the warrant through by taking the entire packet that we had right over to the DA's office and having it go through each one of the stations that it would have done without having to wait.
Okay. And like you said, that was done in this case. We've heard testimony from a U.S. Marshal this morning. The defendant ultimately was apprehended in California. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And he was then booked into the Clark County Detention Center. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And, Your Honor, I just had the opportunity to show Mr. Lederman States Proposed 272 and 273, to which he has no objection, so I move for that admission, please.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, they were admitted.
And permission to publish.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Showing you what's now in evidence as States 273. I'm going to zoom out. Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the way the defendant looked when he was booked into Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department?
According to every picture I've seen, yes.
Okay. And also this, and this would just be a side view. Is that fair?
It's fair.
Okay. As the defendant sits here today, is there any difference in his appearance at all?
He's lost a little mass, but he's pretty much the same person.
Okay. Now, after we discussed, the investigation in as far as the interviews had been conducted, the crime scene had been processed. Now I want to ask you in regards to any forensic testing you requested to be done. As part of your investigation, did you make a request to have several items of what you believe to have evidentiary value be processed by the DNA lab?
I did.
Now, are there limits to how many items can be processed? Who's in charge of those decisions?
I'm pretty certain it's the lab themselves, because on the forms that we try to submit identify exactly how many each specific type of forensic analysis we're requesting can actually be done. I mean, you may have 20 or 30 different things that want to be processed, but it'll say specifically on there that you only have like 5 that you can have completed,
Okay.
and in some cases 3.
Okay. And so, adhering to those guidelines, though, did you request that certain DNA analysis be done in this case?
I did.
And also fingerprints. Were you also able to request that the fingerprint division work on certain pieces of evidence as well?
I did.
Now, you work in what's referred to as the computer forensics lab now. And so I'd like to ask you some questions in regards to the computer forensic lab. Earlier in your testimony, you stated that you process things like cell phones, computers, and now I think you said you're working on networking.
They were trying to get us to do network intrusion as well.
Okay, so just briefly, because we will have an expert from the computer forensic lab discuss some of the forensics that were done in this case, but what are you able to do with phones and computers?
As far as...
So if you have a phone, let's say as the suspect's phone is apprehended, and the district attorney's office or a detective sends it over and says, I'd like to do what's referred to commonly as a dump. Can you explain just what you're able to do with technology if everything is working?
If everything's working, then we have access to various forensic programs that are able to, we wouldn't term it a dump, we would be a forensic image. We do a bit for bit movement of data from one device to our machine specifically, not altering anything, not changing any bit of the information that has to be sitting on there, and not accessing the device in a manner that would be destroying the evidence.
Okay. In this case, did you have certain items like the defendant's cell phone and computer? Did you request that those be analyzed by the computer forensic lab?
When I got them, yes.
Okay. And I'd like to ask you, when this happened on August 8th of 2014, when did you become in possession of the defendant's, I guess we could refer to it as cell phone A, or the first cell phone?
The first cell phone, it was hit or miss. I was supposed to get it various times up until when I actually received it, which was, I believe, December 2nd of 2015.
And how was it that it came to you?
I believe it was attorney Brian Watkins.
Okay, so a defense attorney for Mr. Copenhaver?
I believe so.
Okay. And you were never personally able to recover Ms. McInday's cell phone?
Right, I never received it.
Now, did you come into possession of a cell phone, defendant's second cell phone B, as well as his laptop?
Yes, we did. We received a cell phone, I believe, on my day off, which would be last Monday, the previous Monday, when the trial, when jury selection was still going on. That was when I received word of it, but I didn't receive it. Another investigator, the one who actually had conducted the first forensic examination on the first phone, Jessica Flink, she picked up the phone and was able to do the examination on that day. The laptop didn't arrive to us for three more days at least. I think we got it on Thursday afternoon.
Of last week.
Of last week.
And the cell phone and the laptop were given over to the state by defense.
Correct.
You submitted original charges to the District Attorney's Office Screening Department. In those charges that you submitted to the District Attorney's Office, did they have to do with the events surrounding August 8th of 2014?
Say that one more time?
Yeah. The charging document that you submitted to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution in this case, did all of the charges you submitted have to do with the events that occurred on August 8th of 2014?
All of what I submitted, yes.
And any of the incidents up to that point, you did not investigate, and you did not submit for charges on those?
I did not.
And that is not your job on the domestic violence unit?
Only if it's brought up to me. If it was brought up by the victim at the time when I'm first conducting that interview, which didn't occur at this time anyways. The interview was conducted by Jason. If they identified previous incidents, I would still need to substantiate the previous incidents by pictures or witnesses of some sort to be able to identify it. But at this time, nothing was identified that was a previous incident.
Okay, but when the victim spoke with Detective Lafreniere, she did state that there had been a history of domestic violence abuse throughout the relationship.
I believe so.
And also during the sexual assault nurse examination with Jerry Dermanilian, the nurse, the sexual assault nurse examiner, the victim discussed again that there had been many instances of domestic violence and at least one previous sexual assault, correct?
Correct.
Court's indulgence, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. That concludes my direct examination.
Counsel coming up.